What's up, world? Thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Point Blank podcast. Point Blank explores news and updates in health, business, relationships, and more. The podcast also features guests that are transforming industries, challenging norms, serving as catalysts for momentum, and offering some fresh perspectives. I'm your host, Steve Blank Jr., and since 2016, I've leveraged the modern media landscape to help businesses and brands create more content and make more money. Need a new website? Ready to launch a podcast of your very own? Visit steveblankjr.com today to learn more about why some of my clients are calling me a complete game changer, verbatim. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and share on all of your favorite social and streaming platforms. Let's jump right in to the latest edition of the Point Blank podcast.
My name is Kim Ades. It's going to be my birthday tomorrow, and I'm going to be 55 years old. Wild. I started a coaching company nearly 20 years ago, let's call it 19 years ago, called Frame of Mind Coaching. And I started it when coaching was fairly new. Like now, there are many, many coaches in the world, but at the time, it wasn't such a prominent field. And I started coaching when the trend in coaching was accountability-based coaching. And I don't know if you've heard of that, but at the time, the concept of coaching was, hey, I'm going to hold you accountable to all the little things that you need to do in order to reach your goals. It sounds very reasonable. It sounds very logical, in fact. But when I was exposed to coaching, I thought, that's a tragic mistake. That's a huge problem in the coaching industry, this accountability-based model. For one reason, is that I think it's unethical. The second reason is that I think that it's very harmful. It's detrimental to the person you're coaching. And I thought to myself, people know what they're supposed to be doing, but they're just not doing it. And the question at the time was, why? What is stopping people from doing the things they know they need to do in order to reach their goals? And that's how I started coaching. I said, I want to figure that out. I want to understand what's going on inside of them that prevents them from taking action that will naturally lead them to the outcomes they're looking for. I said, I need to get into their heads. I need to understand how they think. I need to understand how they see the world. And that's when I started Frame of Mind Coaching. And the entire process is designed to really understand the relationship between a person's thinking and the results they're getting in their lives. How's that for an introduction?
Understood. Talk to me about that accountability-based approach to coaching. Is it still prominent today, or is it something that was more prominent 19 years ago?
I mean, it was more prominent. Now there are other modalities, and the philosophy, the thinking around coaching has expanded. But still, many, many coaches use accountability. I've hired so many coaches who lean on accountability, and I push back on it. But why is it unethical, and why is it detrimental? So, Steve, let's say I was your coach, and you said to me, hey, I'm trying to achieve this goal. I've been having a hard time getting there myself. Can you help me? So let me ask you a question. How are you feeling when you're struggling to reach your goals on your own? How do you feel about that?
How do I feel when I struggle to reach them on my own?
Yeah, like before you get to a place where you're hiring a coach, you have something you want to achieve, and it's difficult to get to. It's difficult to attain. So
Sure.
How are you feeling about yourself, about your ability to get there? Like, what's the feeling inside of you?
Probably frustrated, probably not thinking so highly of myself, probably calling into question whether or not I have what it takes to be achieving that goal.
Right. So some self-doubt, maybe.
Sure,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, great. Awesome. So now we create a plan together, and I hold you accountable. And Steve, you're doing all the things you need to do to reach your goals. In fact, you're making progress and you're getting to some of your goals. What happens when I go away?
I probably shift back to the same line of thinking.
Right. So from an unethical standpoint, what I've done is I've created a modality or a method of dependence.
Right.
And as a coach, my job isn't to create dependence. My job is to create independence. But when we when we work together and I am holding you accountable, there's a dependence that takes place. And from my point of view, that's not very ethical. But that's not the bad part. The bad part is this. Let's say you hire me and we create a plan and I hold you accountable, but you're still not doing all the things that you need to be doing in order to reach your goals. And you just hired me to coach you and you spent lots of money and you're working with me, but you're not reaching your goals. How do you feel about yourself now?
And we are not working together, you said, in terms of...
We are working together. We're working together, but you're still not getting your stuff done because I'm holding you accountable. I'm doing that accountability thing.
Gotcha.
And,
and we're
we
still
meet
not
on a weekly basis. And I say, well, Steve, did you do the thing that you said you were going to do last week? And you're like, well, no, actually, I didn't get to it. And here's the reason why. And you're noticing that you're not getting to it. So how do you feel about yourself now? Better or worse?
Absolutely worse. Now I've recruited professional support and am still incapable of achieving said goal.
So therefore, the accountability model, when it's good, it's unethical. When it's bad, it's detrimental. I've made your problem worse than it was when you started.
I see.
Make sense?
Absolutely.
Yes. So my job isn't to hold you accountable. My job is to help you understand and figure out how to hold yourself accountable. You don't need to answer to me. Who am I that you should answer to me? My job is to walk by your side, whether you do what you're supposed to do or not. Doesn't matter to me. My job is to not leave your side. Right?
Absolutely.
And not have any attachment to your ability to reach your goals. And I know it sounds completely backwards in coaching, but if I can stand beside you, whether you're reaching your goals or not, and have undeniable, I don't know, I'm losing my words here, but unaffected, like no matter what you do, I'm there, right? Like I put my stake in the ground and I'm by your side, no matter how you show up, no matter what you do, no matter how you behave. What happens is I have unfailing belief in your abilities. And that's what I need you to learn. And you're seeing me do that for you. Right?
Gotcha. Absolutely.
And what happens is when you see someone doing that for you, you start to take it on. You start to inhabit that. You start to believe it yourself. And that's the process of creating independence.
Understood. I appreciate you breaking that down so thoroughly. I feel like I was able to actually follow along. Talk to me a little bit more about the inception of frame of mind coaching, and maybe even before the entity itself and the organization and the framework, maybe about your relationship to coaching and ultimately what led you to want to pursue a path in that space, and what's your relationship to coaching? Were you a sports coach growing up? Did this just come out of nowhere? That kind of thing.
Yeah, no. So I was the kid in high school that all the people used to come and talk to from all the different, I grew up in the 80s. So, we had the drug kids, the druggies, we called them. We had the preppies, that we had there was a group called the muchachos. And, there were all these little different groups, all these different groups. And I wasn't really in any of the group specifically, but I was friends with people in all of the groups. And when they were struggling, they would come and talk to me because I was the safe, neutral person. And I heard everybody's stories. So from a very young age, I was a natural coach. That's just what I did. And it was just part of my DNA, part of the way I looked at the world, part of the way that I like to interact with people. But I'll tell you a very interesting story. I grew up in Montreal, and in Montreal, you go to grade 6, and then high school starts in grade 7, and you have high school from grade 7 to grade 11. So in grade 7, I was like new in the school, youngest kid in, youngest of all the grades.
Sure.
And I remember it was a lunchtime, and we were in a school where it was a circle. So we'd walk around the circle at lunch. I was walking around the circle, and suddenly this girl walked towards me. She had very, very thin hair. She was very, very tall, very, very thin, and some of her teeth were missing. And I'm like 11 years old at that time. I had never seen anybody like that. And I kind of just looked at her. I just looked at her like my eyes were attracted to her in a way where I'm like, what is that? I'm kind of curious. But she didn't like me looking at her. And so she said, "What are you staring at?" And she pinned me against the wall and decided she wanted to beat me up. And keep in mind, when I was 11 years old, I was extremely shy, very protected by my parents, like not exposed to the world. And so now I have someone wanting to beat me up, and I'm like, that's the last thing I wanted. I was like, just like, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I didn't want to get beaten up. And a whole huge crowd gathered around her. And what ended up happening was a teacher came in and broke it up and everybody dispersed. But I was like, oh my God, like I just got like massively threatened. It was like a moment in my life, one of those, significant moments that you never forget. And what happened was I went home, and like for the rest of high school, I had dreams about her. Her name was Shelley. What was the dream? I dreamt that we were on a roller coaster together. And we were in the same seat, we were together in this. And I remember that what I was trying to do was help her reform. I remember having conversations with her and saying, you don't need to be like this. It's okay. You don't need to get upset. You don't need to resort to violence. You don't need to fight with people. Like, think about that. Those were my dreams.
So you felt prepared early in life. I mean, by 11 years old, you were identifying with being the go-to person, and in your conscious, not only being the person that people can come to when they take the lead, but like to have a dream like that, somebody else is in control of the roller coaster, obviously, but in terms of leading the conversation and expressing yourself and saying it doesn't have to be this way, at 11 years old, you're identifying as the person that takes that step, right?
Well, I saw her as somebody who was in need of help. That's how I interpreted it. So I didn't go through my life feeling threatened by people. I didn't go through my life feeling scared or terrorized. I was terrorized in the moment, but that's not the impression it left on me. The impression it left on me is this person needs some kind of help. And so much so that she's picking on me. Like, I perceive myself as pretty, not very threatening, at the time, extremely innocent. But like that means that something's going wrong here. That means she needs some kind of assistance. That's how I interpreted it. And so from a very young age, I stepped into the mindset of a coach. And it's just part of who I am, part of my DNA.
That's wild. I wasn't expecting nearly for it to go back that far.
You wanted a backstory, so there's my backstory.
Yeah, that's all the way backstory.
Yeah, the less backstory is that I am an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. And I used to own a software company, and we used to build simulation-based assessments to help companies make better hiring decisions. And I ran that company for 10 years, and my life kind of took a bit of a turn. And when it did, I ended up selling my company, and I got hired by a coaching company here in Toronto. And I lasted there for 8 months. Why only 8 months? When you're an entrepreneur and you try to go work for someone else, you're like what is the expression? Like a bull in a china shop. You just don't fit, right? You just don't fit. So I really didn't fit, but also I was observing how they coach. And again, the accountability model was being used at the time.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, I think they're doing it wrong. I think there's a better way. And that's when I started framing my coaching.
And you started day one, minute one. It's just it's a one-woman show.
At the beginning, it was a one-woman show. Well, I had like an admin person that I was working with, because I find when you have somebody that's working with you, even, just to do the books or just to do the admin stuff, answer phones at the time, it's a better way to start a business, because then you have to go to the office and you have to do the work and you have to be there for 8 hours and you have to be productive. So at the time, that's what I had. I had an admin person, but it was essentially a one-woman show. I was the salesperson, the coach, all of it, the speaker, the
Talk to me,
networker.
talk to
I
me
did
about
all
that a
those
little
things.
bit, about like, the what I assume to be what feels like a dichotomy of establishing a business where you're going to help people get out of their mess and see more clearly, for lack of better terms. And you have newly thrown yourself into the world of having a baby, basically, this, new
Yeah.
business of yours. Um, what is it like being the go-to person in people's lives when you yourself are a person that's going through things, and at that particular point going through a great deal in starting a new business, I would assume?
Well, it's funny, okay, so 19 years later, we certify coaches, right? We teach people how to coach. And some of those people are people who end up coaching in the world, and some of those people are leaders who go back to their organizations and become better leaders. And one of the questions that we ask throughout the coaching process is, do you need, excuse me for my language, do you need to have your shit together in order to be an effective coach? That's a question. And it's a tricky question because the answer is yes and no, because there's always shit that comes up. Like, I'll give you an example. In May, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. Well, that's a bit of shit, right? That's a bit of shit. But does that make me suddenly incapable of coaching? No, it adds to my arsenal. It's an experience that's valuable, that gives me perspective. It's something I'm working with, living with, dealing with, sometimes struggling with, but it actually provides me with a lot more context, and it allows me to be far more informed. If I lived a perfect life, I would have zero compassion. I would have zero understanding for what people are going through. I would have zero insight into why people believe what they do about themselves. So experience is valuable in coaching, very, very valuable. And is it possible to have all of your ducks lined up at every moment of your life? It's really not. That's not what being human is about. What is required is, as a coach, is a person who's constantly doing the work on themselves, who says, I get it. I'm in charge of my life, and I am responsible for coming to the call clean and clear and open and receptive and attentive. That's my job. Is it my job to make sure everything in my life is perfect? It's never going to happen.
Right. And so with that in mind, I'm assuming the answer is no, because it's very finite, but I'm thinking, like, is there a ratio or a threshold? Or I guess another way to frame the question would be, if I am on the fence, I think coaching is for me, not I'm looking for a coach, but like I should be a coach. But I find myself dancing with imposter syndrome, because I'm like, right, dude, my life in various degrees at any given moment is one of the hottest messes ever known to man, right? Or feels that way at times. So who am I to step into this role? And so, like, at what point do I know, or does anyone know who feels that imposter syndrome, when we're ready to step into coaching?
Yeah, it's a great question.
If the shit never ends, right? Like it never, never goes away.
It never ends. I think great coaches are not people who don't have self-doubt. I think great coaches are people who are willing to walk into their self-doubt and to explore it and to face it and to say, this doesn't really have value for me right now. I'll tell you my story. When I started coaching, I didn't go to coaching school. I didn't go and get an ICF certified coaching certificate. I did not do that. I thought, I think I can coach better than other people. I think I do have that instinct. But I didn't know. I was terrified. And at the time when I started, I had a huge network in the real estate industry. So I said, you know what? I'll see if I can coach some real estate people, but My expertise is not real estate. What if they ask me real estate questions? I don't know anything about real estate. So I did a few things to begin with. I had some fears. Like, you have imposter syndrome. I guess I had imposter syndrome, but I just had basic fears. One of my fears was, what if they ask me questions I don't know? The other fear I had was, how am I going to fill up an hour with this person? Like, that's a long time. What are we going to talk about for a whole hour? What if I get stuck? What if it goes silent? What if we have nothing more to say?
Is that how you felt going into this call too?
No,
I'm just
I've been doing this for a long time. But 19 years ago, I felt that way. And so I had some strategies to address my fears. Strategy number one is I hired this guy so first of all, I decided to address my fear of not knowing what to say. I did a few things. Thing number one was I coached a group of people instead of coaching one-on-one. I thought, well, if I'm coaching 5 people and everyone talks for 5 or 10 minutes, the hour will pass. Right? Smart. Yeah. And then the second thing I did was I hired this guy who was a real estate coach, a traditional real estate coach. I said, can you co-coach with me in case something comes up that I don't have an answer to? You'll be there, right?
Well played.
And the third thing I did is I started off by calling it a pilot. I said, look, I'm piloting this idea. I'm not charging a lot of money. I charge very, very little, but I'm piloting, will you come along for the ride? And when you pilot something, you're allowed to make mistakes. And more importantly, you're allowed to get feedback. How did it go? What should go well? What should we keep? What should we throw away? How do we improve this thing? What did I do well? What did I do wrong? Mm-hmm. And the feedback that I received was, we don't like that guy. We don't need that guy. We don't need that kind of coaching. We like what you're doing. But I made a very big strategic decision at the time. And the reason I made this decision was because of my insecurity as a coach. And that whole question about how am I actually going to help people move forward? How am I going to get into their heads? How am I going to address that problem? That problem is, why aren't you doing what you're supposed to be doing? What's getting in the way? How am I going to do that? How am I going to get into people's heads, understand how they think, how they see the world, how they feel about themselves, what their past experiences were like? I said, you know what? I'm going to get my clients to journal, but I'm going to be able to see their journal. So every day they're going to journal in a private and secure online journal. And every time they journal, I'm going to be able to read and ask them questions and give them comments, feedback. And the reason I asked them to journal is so that I could understand how they operate, how they see the world, mostly what they believe to be true, what they value, what their priorities are. And it would give me content to work with when the call came, because now I know what's important to them. They're telling me in their journal. I had no idea what I was onto. I had no clue how powerful, how important, how critical journaling is in the coaching process. So now, 19 years later, we have a journaling software. We use it. We license it out to other coaches as well. But it's the centerpiece of how we coach. So if I'm coaching with you, what happens is you get a journaling question or a prompt every single week. And every time you journal, your coach, I have a team of coaches now, they read and respond to your journal every single day. No days off, no weekends, no vacations, every day. So what happens when you're journaling every day with your coach? Your coach is learning so much about you. They're learning so much more than they could ever learn about you in a call. Right there. So they're getting a download of data. That data allows the coach to understand your patterns of behavior, your patterns of thought, your reactions to things, your relationships, all of it. I feel that a lot of coaches try to coach without enough information. So this provides the coach with a huge amount of information, much more than they would ordinarily get. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is what happens when you're journaling every day? You're doing the work. You're doing the work every day. What happens when you do the work every day? What happens?
Stuff magically falls into place.
Stuff happens. You make progress. But the third thing that happens is if you're journaling every day and I am reading and responding to your journals, what happens between us? What happens when I show up for you every single day?
we grow depth in our
We grow depth,
relationship.
and you start to trust me.
Absolutely.
And only when you trust me as a coach, right? Only when the client trusts the coach does travel take place. If you don't trust the coach, what happens? You stop doing the work. You resist. You put the brakes on. But if you trust me as a coach, guess what? We're moving at a much, much, much more rapid pace, right? We go deeper and we go further and we go faster because the relationship that we've built together is intimate. And it's unlike any other relationship you will have with any other person, someone who really knows you inside, outside, upside down, thoroughly. And those are the elements that are needed for transformational coaching. I see a lot of coaches who try to coach without a journal. I don't understand how they do it. Honestly, it's like walking into a room with a blindfold on and the room is dark and you're feeling your way and looking for the lights. When you are working with a journal, you're walking into the room, the lights are on, and you see where everything is.
Like everything. And both of you can see clearly. And the one thing that stands out to me about that too is if without a journal, if we meet once a week, you rely exclusively on my memory and my filters and how I'm consciously or subconsciously prioritizing things with you based on the degree of trust at that point. That may influence some of the things that are shared, which could be true in writing too, but would be that much more prevalent, I would assume, in person if instead it was a situation where, again, there was no journal and once a week it was up to me to decipher and synopsize my hot mess of the last 7 days. Yeah. is like, you know, the idea of walking into a room with the lights off, when you look at it that way, seems like a conservative metaphor, you know what I mean? Like that's like just a drop on the iceberg, so to speak.
Yes. And that's exactly correct. And in fact, what you just said is like so perfectly accurate. As I was listening to it, I'm like, wow, that's actually very right. And I've never actually talked about the whole idea that you need to use your memory to and your filters to come and share with me. When you're sharing every day and I'm asking the questions, I'm getting a lot more information. But here's the other very interesting thing. So most coaches have decided that it's not their agenda that matters, it's the client's agenda, which theoretically makes perfect sense. But I feel like the client isn't always clear about the agenda that needs to happen. That's
right. In part, the client is coming to you to establish an agenda or reform their agenda, right?
Exactly, because their agenda hasn't worked thus far. So what happens in regular coaching? You come onto the call and I say, hi, Steve, how are you today? What do you want to talk about today?
Right.
But in frame of mind coaching, that's not how it goes. It goes like this. Hi, Steve, how are you today? There are 3 things or 5 things that I want to talk about on my agenda. I'm going to tell you what they are. What's on your agenda? And the coach, because they have all this data and they've extracted all this interesting information, they have an idea of where we need to go. What is getting in your way? What's interfering? And we want to explore that in the coaching. So the coach leads the coaching. That's why you hired us. We don't get hired and say, okay, now you lead.
Right.
Doesn't make any sense.
Car makes a noise. You go to the mechanic and start telling the mechanic where to look, type thing.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly that.
Wow. Can we talk a little bit about the team side of things and the growth? Like how many frame of mind coaches are there 19 years later?
So I have 2 divisions.
Okay.
2 divisions. I have frame of mind coaching, and then I have a division that serves a younger market.
What is it younger?
younger, like early career, young professional, graduated from high school, 18 to let's say 30, 35, like a younger
Gotcha.
demographic.
Because again, frame of mind is specifically, I don't want to say tailored to, but tends to
It's an
serve the
executive.
executive level. Right.
Executive, highly driven, leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs, that kind of thing.
Understood.
So we have these two divisions. For my coaching division, we have 8 coaches. On the other side of the equation, it's 9 coaches. So how did I build all these coaches? Well, I told you that at the beginning, I was coaching groups. One day I was at a conference and I talked to this guy and he's like, I'm looking for a coach. I said, I'll coach you. And I ended up, and I was terrified because I never coached a one-on-one before, right? And I was still very green, very new. It was my first year, maybe my second year of doing this. And we started coaching together. And now we're having these calls once every week. And every time we have a call, he says, I hate you. And I love it because I realize that every time he says, I hate you, it means like I'm finding the needle in the haystack. I am poking the pain. I am identifying the core issues and he's feeling it. And I'm starting to realize I'm a really great coach. I'm only starting to realize that at the time. But after, at the time where I was coaching people in 10-week cycles, after the 10 weeks, he's like, okay, well, what do I do now? And I'm like, well, why don't you coach the next group with me? Or, right? Why don't you learn how to coach? The long and short of it is we ended up creating a coaching certification process. But who's allowed to get certified? Only clients. So they have to have been coached with us. Only once you get coached, now you're eligible to go through certification. Why? Why do we do it that way? Because I feel that one of the greatest mistakes in coaching education is that we don't make it mandatory that the person gets coached. They get training, they get a coach who oversees their work, but they don't actually make it mandatory that the individual gets coached. They're not doing their own work. You got to do your own work. You got to make a commitment to doing your own work if you're going to be an amazing coach. And what I wanted was for a person to go through the process, do their own work, but also get exposed to phenomenal coaching. So now you know what it looks like. Now you know what it feels like. Now you understand the process. Now we can pull back the curtain and show you why this worked, how it happened, what the philosophy is, what the coaching steps are, how to move forward and be your own coach. So every single one of my coaches started off as a client.
That's awesome. And can I ask you about the certification itself in a world where today there's no shortage of coaches and as a result, no shortage of on-ramps to coaching and certification programs? How do you differentiate, or what makes your certification the one that's worth taking a second look at type thing?
So I want to make it clear, I'm not in the certification industry. I'm in the coaching industry.
Sure.
Okay. So we happen to certify people because we deliver outstanding coaching. That's how it happened. So I often tell people, because I get people calling me all the time. And the question is like, how do I select a coaching school? And I give them criteria. And I say, number one, make sure that they have you getting coached. You need to get coached. Getting coached is more important than going to coaching school. So number one, make sure you find a good coach. And that must be part of the process. Number two, make sure they're not only teaching coaching, make sure they're coaching too. Number three, look at their track record. Number four, what is their style of coaching? Is it accountability based? Is it mindset based? Is it business coaching? What kind of coaching are you doing here? Make sure that's the kind of coaching you want to be doing. Number five, make sure it's resonating for you. If it doesn't resonate for you, keep looking. Like, it's not a price issue. Number six, what's the process? How are you learning about coaching? Are you just attending classes, or are you having a personal experience here? You must understand coaching from the inside out. It can't be from the outside in. It cannot. Doesn't work. As a company, when I say look at their track record, who have they coached? And what do these people have to say about their coaching? Does their coaching include a methodology where they are collecting data on a regular basis? Right? So we use journaling. Other people use other methodologies. Make sure there's a data collection system when you're choosing a coaching school. So
speaking of data collection system, sorry, twice I've thought of this and forgotten, but I wanted to say, kudos on the additional opportunities that you identified within, for instance, licensing that software. I'm only making connections now that because of your background in software, that probably played a large role in this proprietary system, right?
Yes, correct.
Cool. So absolutely.
So the thing is, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a software developer or a technician at all. I just say, I want it to work like this. This is what it needs to do. And I find the right people to execute for me. And have I made mistakes along the way? Of course. I hired a software company that charged me an arm and a leg, and I paid for it. Then I found another software company that was much more reasonable and much more affordable. Like as a business owner, you're gonna, in order to move forward, you need to take action. And sometimes the action isn't always perfect. Doesn't matter. You still need to move forward. Still need to take action.
Totally. A lot of the questions that you brought up with regard to I'm seeking out an educational institution or a certification for coaching sound like some of the questions that you would ask when considering a coach. Would you agree, disagree? Are there, and again, we can walk through that separately. Some of them, but some of them just seemed identical as you were explaining those questions. I'm like,
yes.
She's kind of getting ahead of me because I did specifically want to ask, because again, in a world of super saturated coaches where there's plenty of people that need coaching, when somebody decides to take that step, what are some of the things that we can be asking these potential coaches to make sure we're getting aligned with the right people? Does it resonate with you? Things like that you said really stood out. But
do you feel like you're in good hands? Do you feel like this person is leading you through a process? Do you feel like this person is proactive or passive? Do you feel like they get you? Are they asking the right questions? Like, is there that chemistry? That's very, very important. There's not always chemistry, right? Like I personally, as a coach, I believe in hiring coaches. I've hired so many terrible coaches. So many in my day.
What made them terrible coaches?
They missed the boat. They tried to hold me accountable. They weren't asking the right questions. They were looking at my actions instead of my thinking. Like the whole thing. They're inexperienced. They're just going down the wrong path, not connecting with me properly. It's so many things, not getting how I operate. You need to get how someone operates in order to make an impact on them. If you're not getting it, then it's not going to work.
Copy that. What's your relationship like to, and I'm going to kind of maybe relieve you of some hot seat for just a second or two, but like what's your situation in terms of content and as it relates to marketing? Obviously, you're no stranger to the podcast dynamic. We connected via social media. I think I may have even stumbled into your profile. You're using podcast guests, right?
Yeah, we use podcast guests.
And so all of that to kind of say, it seems like it's a pretty deliberate and intentional approach to all things content marketing at Frame of Mind, no?
So yes, I'm a podcast guest on many podcasts. I am on podcastguestlist.com. I recently hired somebody who goes out there and tries to find the right podcast for me to be on and does podcast pitches. I did that early on in my career and kind of went on all kinds of podcasts, and then I slowed down and I'm starting up again because I feel like even if the podcast isn't super famous, what it does is it helps me create content that we can then leverage by cutting it up into bite-sized pieces, reposting, by using the transcript if we want. Like there's just so many great reasons to be on a podcast. For me, it's very easy. I don't have to travel. I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to prepare. I don't need the questions in advance. I just show up and have a great conversation. It's just easy for me. I've been doing it for a long time. But that's not our only content mechanism. So one of the things I do is I have a group that I run called Kim's Coaching Corner. And in Kim's Coaching Corner is coaches from all over the place, people who are certified in the frame of mind coaching methodology. Our coaches participate as well. But really any leader who is struggling and wants to learn and apply some coaching skills. And we record those. So they're not private coaching conversations. It's more of a training, teaching, open conversation. And we record those calls and I send the recordings to a writer who then listens to the recording and finds really great content to pull out and create articles with that are SEO friendly.
Hey, digital high five for you. There's a whole
Take it.
There's a whole agency by the name of Dolo Media that more or less relies on that process, that principle, taking long form content and breaking it down into one of the 4 mediums through which people consume content, right? It's either audio, video, pictures, graphic elements, or written word. And you actually take the extra step, right? Like a lot of people are coming around to the idea of within a 17-minute video is various 7-second clips that will be great. But within that also are blog opportunities, right? Transcribing and transposing audio elements into written word. And then furthermore, either working with professionals and freelancers and subcontractors or AI, depending on how good you can get it to collaborate with you.
I've tested it. They don't understand my unique point of view, which is a problem for me.
Okay. Are you giving it a lot of context?
I'm not very good at like saying the specific things. Admittedly, I'm not. I've tried it and they're like, they grab coaching content from the internet and it's just very, very generic for me. And it doesn't give that specific point of differentiation that I'm looking for.
Yeah. If you think some of your own content and the context through which you've been able to communicate your brand and all the countless hours and sleepless nights that go into like the perfect way that we're going to describe our company's philosophy, you can take every bit of that and feed it to AI and have it use it as additional context to either shape the voice or the tone or the message itself, the contents of the message. So it's definitely one of those things where if you're like, we are a coaching company, here is a 1-minute transcript from our recording, write me a blog, is like, oh, okay, you're telling this thing to go comb the internet for all things coaching, cross-reference it with the data that you've given it, right? Back to our conversation around data and how important it is to collect that in order to personalize the experience or the coaching call or the AI results in this case. That may be an approach that you could try, right? Just give it that much more information. I would, if I were you, if that's the problem I'm facing, I would, in a new tab, open every page that exists on my website and find a way to communicate it to AI. It's also important to know that you don't have to do all of that in one breath or in one command, so to speak. You could instead say, I'm going to ask you to write a blog about the following transcript, and then put the transcript and then return down and say, before you begin writing the transcript, I'm going to give you some additional context. Some people ask a question then and say like, do you understand? And it'll be like, yes, I understand. I'll wait. And then you can come back and say, this is our company's philosophy for context for the blog. Don't begin. Do you understand? It'll be like, yep, got it. And then you can go back and get our proprietary journaling software, give it the different pieces, and then just say, go.
Is this your area of expertise? Sounds like you're very good at this.
It's slowly becoming a space in which I am increasingly effective. Just because it's been super powerful.
Well, maybe we can discuss that after.
Oh yeah, of course, no problem. What else? What are, or let me start here. I'll go broad. What's your like your why, right? So everybody's got an underlying driving factor, and it could, whatever it is, there's no wrong answer. I'm sure there's a wrong answer out there somewhere, but it could be like lifestyle, and I want to coach the world to a place where like I am the frame of mind billionaire and whatever. Or it could be like a single person in your life that inspires you. Like what? Just
I'm going to answer your question.
Do it
by telling you that I don't think it's the right question.
Okay.
You're like, why not? I'm the podcast host. I get to ask any question I want. I think your why, my why, his why, her why, all of our whys are essentially the same. Why do you do anything? You do anything. The reason you do anything is because you think it's going to make you feel good. That's the reason you do anything. So I don't think asking about what's your why is the right question. I think the right question is, what's your why not? What's stopping you? What's getting in your way? What's interfering with your ability to do what you want, live the life you want, feel good? What's getting in your way? And I think so many people spend so much time trying to figure out their why, their purpose, you know what? Let's look at it this way, okay? Let's say my goal is to lose 50 pounds. Let's just say that's my goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I can give you my why, because, when I'm older, I'm going to have grandchildren. I'm going to want to play with them. I want to be fit. I want to live a long life. I don't want to be sick as I age. I can give you a million whys.
Sure.
But all those whys still don't help me take the action I need.
Yeah. And I asked that question kind of coming from I feel like you reframing that puts us on the back end of the purpose, and so you spoke to my question also, which is like the purpose of anything is because we think it will make us feel good. But I feel like your approach to reframing that question almost puts us in a place of like, oh, okay, well, now that we are where we are, what are the things that stand before us and prevent us from getting to whatever our goal is, which I totally understand and is absolutely right. But I was totally just asking from a place of like, passion, stuff like that.
Of course,
things get tough, and
I didn't mean to say like you're wrong. It's the wrong question.
Oh no, and I didn't take that way either.
We spend so much time asking like, what's your why? What's your why? What's your why?
Yeah, you're right.
For me, the more interesting question is, what's your why not?
Yeah.
What's getting in your way? How many leaders I work with who tell me I'm still not living up to my potential? And all of these leaders are massively accomplished humans.
What is getting in everybody's way then? Let's maybe unpack that. Like in your, without, unpacking people's individual stories over the course of 19 years, and maybe even because times and technology and society have changed, maybe we can talk about even the last like few years, what seem to be the most common things that people feel are in their way?
Well, what they feel is in their way isn't what is in their way.
Okay. Can we have two silos of conversation parallel then?
Sure. So what they feel is in their way is they feel like something's wrong. Something's wrong with them. Something's wrong with other people. Something's wrong. Something's broken. Something's not right. Other people don't. So what I see is like we work with the highly driven population, and we see them struggle in 4 key areas. Number one is they feel a huge sense of isolation, right? Like, so they feel alone. They feel like they can't relate to people. They feel like they have a huge burden of responsibility that rests on their shoulders by themselves. And it's not easy to share that responsibility. They feel like they're, in the boat rowing on their own and nobody else is pulling their weight. They just feel very isolated and there's no one to talk to. The second thing that we see is that these leaders feel very often that they have friction with others. So they see other people's behaviors and like they're not working hard enough. They don't have the same sense of urgency. They don't get it. They don't understand. It's not their business, so they're not going to work as hard as I am, and on and on and on, right? So they have this mentality about others, and they have this friction with others. Sometimes that friction is outward, like I'll fight with you, you can hear the fight, but most of the time the friction is internal. I see your behavior, but I keep it inside. And so I'm like just not settled. I'm very often at odds with the way I feel about others. The third thing is that these people tend to have this sense of chronic dissatisfaction. So as I said before, they never feel like they're living up to their potential. They've achieved a lot, but they feel like there's still so much more to go. They don't understand why it's so hard. They don't understand why it's so hard for them. They don't understand what's wrong with them and what they need to do in order to make progress or move forward. And they feel like this sense of frustration. Like they keep trying all these things and it's not working. And why isn't it working? And they should be further ahead and they don't understand what's wrong. And last but not least, it's a term I invented. It's called slippage. And what is slippage is these people are working super hard. They're very focused. They're trying so hard. They're pounding the pavement, but they're letting very, very important things slip through the cracks. Hence the term slippage. What are they letting go of? They're not taking care of themselves. They're not sleeping well. They're not eating well. They're not exercising. They're not having a lot of fun. They're not resting enough. They're not having great relationships with people. They're not interacting well. And so what you see is they're very drained. They're very tired, right? And they get to a place where they say, I don't have time for all of this stuff. That's not my priority. I don't have time. And what they're really saying is, I don't have time to live a healthy, fulfilling life. Right? So those are the 4 areas that they're struggling with. Why do they struggle in these areas? Which is the question you were asking before. And fundamentally, it's because of the way they think and what they believe to be true about themselves, about the work, about the workers, about their environment, about the competition, about everything. Everything. We have beliefs about everything we interact with, everything we see, everything we smell, everything we taste, everything we touch, everything. And those beliefs will determine what our experiences are like with those things. And so oftentimes we have beliefs that clash with our desires, but we're not even aware that we have those beliefs.
That's where coaching comes in.
I'll give you an example. I had a call with a client earlier today, and he has 4 children, and his wife fights with one of the children all the time. And he wants his wife to change. She should be behaving differently. She should know how to talk to this child. She shouldn't have fights with him all the time. And this has been going on. Like the kid is already 13 years old. And she just keeps fighting, and he keeps thinking she needs to change. Well, she's not changing, is she? He believes she needs to change. He believes she's wrong. He believes she's at fault. So what happens with them? Their relationship becomes strained. He becomes distant from her. And those beliefs cause him to have a relationship which is completely the opposite of what he really wants. What he really wants is connection. And I said, well, what if she doesn't have to change? What if you can let go of that? What if she doesn't have to change? Well, they're still fighting. That's the fact. That's reality. I'm like, well, what if you can teach your son to deal with his mother a little bit more effectively?
Right. Like it's going to be, people can change, but there's no changing people, right?
Well, the problem is we hinge our happiness on other people's behaviors. And when we do that, we give up control and we give up, right? We become very volatile. And that volatility is exhausting. And it doesn't lead to a life of happiness. It just doesn't.
Absolutely. And there are 9 billion concurrent stories around us on this planet. And so the opportunity to get wrapped up in what he and she should be doing and how everybody else should be living up to standards that I'm happy to speak on, but may not necessarily be living out in my own life even. I digress.
Exactly.
You know.
But you don't digress. That's exactly correct.
How about with the younger group? Would you say that they're the same hurdles or a different set? And if so, what are the most common themes and things that are, in their way?
So what we're seeing is that a younger generation is both dramatically more advanced than we were at the same age, and also struggling a whole lot more. So they're exposed to so much more than I was at that age. And that exposure causes a much higher degree of stress, anxiety, depression, fear. I see so many young people who are simply paralyzed. They don't know what to do, how to get there. They don't know their next move. So what we see is stagnation, not with all of them, but with some of them. But so many of them live with this self-doubt. They're constantly like trying to assess how they fit in, how they're doing, how other people view them, whether or not they're okay. And so there's this emotional state that we see that has a great deal of volatility in that age range. So they have all the intellect in the world. Some of them are extremely driven. They have capacity, capability, they have all that, but their emotional volatility slows them down.
So it's that same theme again of just being able to, I don't want to say compartmentalize, but to be able to stay in your lane or recognize, that the world around us isn't going to, not to be so deeply connected with moving parts that we don't have control over.
Well, sometimes it's that, and sometimes it's, they're always seeking evidence to prove the fact that, they're not respected or valued. And so it's teaching them the skill of thinking in a way that leads them to the outcomes they're looking for. And what I find is, and it's not just young people, we all do it. We often think in ways that leads us to outcomes that we're not looking for, the opposite of what we're looking for. And I see that with everyone we coach, everyone. There's nobody who escapes. I just find younger people are grappling with slightly different issues. More of young people struggle with interpersonal issues. Like we see that as a much higher issue.
Like struggling to connect interpersonally.
Yeah, it's not only connection, but they have a lot of friction. They have friction with their parents. They have friction with their bosses, their coworkers. They don't like what someone said. They said this. What does it mean? They gave someone else more attention than I did. What does that mean? Like they're analyzing everything and they're replaying things in their minds, and they're very nervous. They're very on edge with respect to their interpersonal relationships with their significant others, and on and on and on. They're just on edge.
Gotcha. Kim, I want to be respectful of your time. I've got maybe another minute to share time and space with you. Would you be so kind as to give us a comprehensive plug for everybody that has taken this on and
comprehensive plug?
Yeah. Give me, the website. How can we get in touch? Okay. Or, what does the onboarding process look like?
Yeah, onboarding process, go to frameofmindcoaching.com, set up a one-on-one call with me. It's right there on the front page. If you're a young person and you're interested in coaching, go to thejournalthattalksback.com and just investigate. And if you're a leader, if you're a coach, if you're someone who's listening to this and saying, man, I want to be part of a coaching community, or I would love to get some support for my coaching, my leadership, consider joining Kim's Coaching Corner. It's on the website as well. Check it out. There's like a link. Just go to frameofmindcoaching.com and it's there. And if you're a coach and you're like, wow, I really want to journal with my clients, that could be a game changer for me. It will be a game changer. And go to journalengine.com and you can sign up there, and it's pretty affordable. So check it out.